Hello, friends. How are y'all doing tonight? I am in an interesting mood. There's a big part of me that would love to just be playing some video games right now, some video games. But in another way, this has also been a stream I've kind of been looking forward to for a while. not like I could plan this out very far in advance. I mean, it's basically just like, hey, since this guy uploaded his video, and now I get to react to it. But more in the sense that, like, I've wanted to talk about, or have a good place to kind of talk about, like, my graduate school experience a little bit more, and offer my thoughts on just, was it all worth it? In some kind of, just some kind of forum that, we can have archived here on the channel in a nice, easy to digest package. I think at a certain point, I will probably make a, once the 3D model's done, and once I can just start doing some funny little sketch comedy type shit with that, and make little green screen videos, what have you, when I'm ready to start making vlogs, basically, proper vlogs, I would probably make an even more bite-sized version of what the stream's going to ultimately be, but yeah, I am very much interested in expressing how I felt about my experience in university and grad school. And despite the fact that those experiences were overall miserable and probably shaved a good couple of years off of my life with all the stress that I had to go through. And, also ate up, like, the, my 20s, the time in your life where generally you're meant to be out there having fun, cutting a rug. That's not a saying that anyone says anymore. It was maybe consumed entirely by organic chemistry and other types of chemistry. I don't regret it at all, and I would still recommend someone, as a 18-year-old, go through with it if they have the means, the resources, and everything, because it tells you a lot about yourself as an overall adventure. Just because of the extreme pressure that undergrad and especially grad school will put on you as, like, a STEM student. Specifically, my background's chemistry. Hi, if you're new here, I am a chemist. I have a master's degree in chemistry. And I lost my train of thought. Oops. Well, I guess that's what all that book learning does to you. It makes you forget what your fucking sentences are like, huh? But yeah, I think I was saying, like, despite the fact that it's awful, I would still say it's good to do it because it tells you a lot about yourself. Like, how well do you handle pressure? What are you like under extreme pressure? What's the extent to which you can push yourself mentally and physically in terms of exhaustion? How well do you cope with not having much time for social gatherings, things like that? It's maybe a trial by fire informative experience, but honestly, while you're young, it's kind of good to just have that early on, right? Because when you need to learn stuff about yourself early in life, because the earlier you learn stuff about yourself, the less time you waste kind of wandering about life being like, I don't know how I feel about these things, or I think I feel this way, and making dumb decisions as a result. If you actually know yourself well from an early age, then you'll be able to apply that knowledge from an early age. It's a good thing. You just have to go through an intense, horrid, like, years of 80-plus hour work weeks. If you're truly dedicated about it. If you're not truly dedicated about it, then, well, you're probably not going to learn anything. But if you're actually pushing yourself to learn something you're passionate about, then, you'll see how far you can go for your passions. But I've already kind of rambled on long enough about it. I'm sure I will ramble on a lot more during the stream as points are brought up, because there's a lot that's interesting about the academia system and how counterintuitive it feels at times. Let's put it that way. And with the help of Mr. Tom Explosions and Fire, I'm pretty sure it'll help structure my thoughts in a way that only a script could actually compare in making my thoughts not a jumbled mess of word diarrhea. So instead of writing my own script for right now, I'll just kind of, piggyback off of someone else's script. Ah, yeah, that's how YouTube works. So yeah, the title of today's video is we're reacting to is Academia is Strange, space period, by Explosions and Fire, the Australian man. You know, the guy who makes lots of funny explosions and or fire, allegedly. He is a guy who I'm sure he will explain that he did in fact do his he did in fact complete his PhD recent-ishly, maybe within like the last year and a half, in Australian University, and he has like a degree, I believe it's like in chemical physics or something like that, something that's like technically not the chemistry department but works so much with chemistry and light that it might as well be chemistry. And I'm sure, you know, maybe his experience is a little bit better than with the American education system, but I'm sure it was probably still hell for him too. So I'm very interested to hear his opinions on him. I respect this guy's opinions a lot. I mean, maybe it's a little parasocial just to be like, I respect this guy's opinions because he makes funny and informative chemistry videos where things blow up. But as far as chemists go across YouTube, I love Explosions and Fire. Does great work. Very funny. Seems to have a, you know, good sense of humor and a good mind about him. So yeah, no, I want to compare his experience with mine and just kind of offer some thoughts about university. I mean, you know, I know I think my core audience is past the age of deciding whether they go to university, but maybe if you're a random lurker passing by, you might, you know, it might influence a thing or two. And even if you're just part of my core audience, I think it'd be just a good time to get to know me a little bit more, and just kind of explore how my brain works and how it has been shaped by the fires of university. So let's pause the music for today, and get on with it. All right. Academia is strange.
Academia.
Yes.
Today, we're talking about academia. It's a bit of a weird system, and I'd like to get into my experiences with academia, the bizarre nature of it all, and also, I guess, maybe some advice from me, sort of very biased advice. I made a video about 3 years ago where I was making ice cream, and I was at the end of writing up my thesis. Well, I was
so
not quite at the end, but it felt like the end. At that
Feels
time,
like a long time
I wanted to do anything but talk about my thesis and my PhD experience. It's been a couple of years. I think it's time to talk about it. People ask me questions. They send me questions.
Talk about my trauma.
Really positive messages all the time, and I kind of never really address my PhD. And it is really nice, actually, getting all these nice positive messages, I got to say. Here's one. It says, I've just been accepted into a PhD program. We'll be growing single crystals of photoswitchable explosives. That's really cool. That's a cool message to get. Dear Dr. Tom, I have made a terrible decision. I have just started a PhD program in laser spectroscopy. May the academia lizard gods have mercy upon my unfortunate soul. That's a somewhat positive message. Ayo, my first child has been conceived during one of your videos.
Okay.
And it's got no relevance to this video. I just really wanted to read out that message. There's precedent now, so, you know, if you get really bored during this video, people do ask.
Yeah, I'll just start jacking off during the middle of the video. No, YouTube, that's a joke.
Get to where I am. Like, how do you get here? How do you get here? Where is this? Where am I? Before we take a deep dive, I think I need to start with two reasonably large disclaimers. All right, and the first one might come across as somewhat controversial. I'm
gonna say you shouldn't drink 8 liters of solid-grade acetone. I knew it. He wasn't actually as cool as I thought he was.
Somewhat enjoyed my PhD, and I still work as a postdoc, and I really enjoy my job. Despite all my rage, they still let me be a rat in the cage. It's where all my little rat friends are. It's like, it's great. We got a little paper mill in the corner. It's fantastic.
I mean, I could add on just, you know, my personal experience is that, like, yeah, I say all the time, like, I really hated my undergrad and graduate school experience. It was quite miserable with having to, like I alluded to, 80-hour work weeks just between either an undergrad, doing all of my classes, and going to labs and doing the homework for it and reading the textbook so goddamn thoroughly and taking extremely detailed notes so that way I could actually be prepared for things and not have to cram before every exam and, you know, actually learn things into my brain so I'd be good at what I know in the future. Um, taking time to properly learn stuff. And then, a little bit of undergraduate lab research, kind of fake play research for practice here and there. And then, of course, going into grad school, then that was the giant balancing act of my own classes, TAing, which I don't miss really at all. But then the research, which even though the research was kind of one of the primary things making me miserable, because a little secret is that science never works the way the textbook says it does. If it did, then you wouldn't be doing any research because everything would just be known already. But despite the fact that research was kind of miserable in some ways, I did really enjoy just doing the research. In fact, let me just kind of put the music back on as I chat a little more. Like, I did really enjoy doing the actual research itself. Like, I got into chemistry because I wanted to do chemistry. Like, it's very fun to be able to know what the microscopic structure of something is, mix that with another thing that you know the structure of, be able to predict how it's going to react to form a new microscopic structure, make a whole bunch of those, and like come up with just new materials that literally nobody else has ever messed with before. Its most remarkable property might be that it's blue and it doesn't do anything, and it will die if it touches the air. But like, it's so cool for like somebody who's chemistry brained. Like, you made a thing, you did it. It's like the satisfaction of building like another chair in your wood shop. Many other people have made chairs that are, very similar to it, but nobody has made this chair. No one's made the chair that has your exact intricacies and love and sweat and blood poured into it. And it's fun to also kind of research and solve a puzzle and try to feel like you're contributing to the advancement of humanity in some way, and moving our collective knowledge forward a little bit. It's really a good feeling to do that. And it has this allure that's really hard to explain for people who just don't have the same kind of like research focused mentality. Like, it kind of makes sense a little bit, I imagine, to people who have like a more of a just creative, like art focused mentality of like, yeah, I want to make art, even though other people have drawn humans and humanoids and their OCs before. I want to draw mine and put my influence in it. But it's maybe not as laborious in, say, like the math and analytics department as research is, like hard science research is. But despite the fact that I spent so many hours miserable doing said research, there's still a very significant part of me that wants to go back in some way. Like, I know the better part of my mind knows, and I listen to that part of my mind, thankfully, that like it is absolutely not worth it to go back to being miserable and having 80-hour work weeks just to play around with rare and expensive chemicals again. Like, I enjoy my life more, where I make more money for fewer hours of work at my actual job, and I still have time to make a streaming hobby on the side just for fun, to actually have a social circle in my life again. But there is still a part that says, I do want to mix rare and expensive chemicals together, and I do want to make new molecules no one's ever done before, even if it does shit fuck all and it's just green, and like it's cool that it's green. I can't explain it otherwise. Yeah, I think those are my thoughts on that part. So we can get back to the video on that part. Before I have to pause again, I'm sure. I'm sure I'll be talking more about that 80-hour work week, before the video's done.
There's this notion that you kind of have to hate your PhD. You got to suffer. I think that comes from a place where it's so self-motivated that if you're having fun or enjoying yourself, it means you're not grinding hard enough. So everyone always talks about, oh, I hate my PhD. It sucks. It sucks. It definitely sucked at points, but in retrospect, it was pretty cool to be paid to turn up to do science, do novel
Right.
science every day. There's
You're being paid for your hyperfixation. Like, what more could somebody ask for?
plenty of things to hate on. Don't get me wrong, I will be hating in this video. The second disclaimer is I'm giving my opinions, obviously from my experience, but academia is so varied. It varies from country to country, obviously, but it varies even between labs in the same building. You do your PhD and you kind of have one.
The quick tangent is that for my group, we were not even close to the most overworked chemistry group at my grad school. Our PI, the principal investigator, aka the professor of the lab, set a guideline of like, well, I expect you to just, to be doing 40 hours a week of work, and that includes the research or doing the chemistry, analyzing your samples, reading the literature, preparing PowerPoints, etc., etc. But like, when you when you run the numbers yourself, 40 hours a week is not sufficient for that. Even if you're working perfectly efficiently. And that was like middle of the pack kind of level of like effort and time we had to put into our shit. There was the lower end of like the labs that kind of do funny fluorescent spectroscopy stuff that was just like, yeah, everyone in this lab seems to have fun. They have like a fucking softball team or a volleyball team or something like that. And they only spend a handful of hours in the lab, and like, some of them take like 6 or 7 years to graduate. 7. But compared to the usual 5, but like, the PI of that lab is fine with it, doesn't care, and it's just like, yeah, as long as the research gets done eventually, it's fine. It's whatever. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, there are the poor organic chemists who spend literally basically their entire waking lives in the lab, because they have reactions that are in that middle time of like, well, they don't take such a short time that it's not inconvenient, but they also don't take such a long time that you can just leave it overnight and come back the next day. They take like a 6 to 8 hours kind of range, and if you leave them running for too long, they'll burn and turn to sludge and tar, so you have to be there at the end to like actually work up your shit and make sure it's purified so that way it doesn't turn to tar. And, then you have your PI basically constantly barking at you because they're an asshole, and they're just being like, why aren't you putting out more papers? I need more papers. I need to be more important. So that's the life of an organic chemist. Thankfully, I wasn't that. I was doing organometallic chemistry and catalyst synthesis, but it was still too much for me, is the point of what I was saying. So within a school, even, going down the hall, the grad students you once took classes with might be having the fucking greatest time of their lives while you are stuck in Miseryville and there's no way out except literally leaving with your master's degree between your tail instead of going for your PhD, like me.
One person in charge of you, and that's it. And so how that person decides to run the group and your experiences is so varied. I obviously
also the intergroup drama, the intra-group drama too, but that's a whole separate story.
I did my PhD in Australia. I don't know if that comes through. This is obviously Australia. Just wanted to get that out of the way in case you are looking to do a PhD.
Pixels are 6 times larger in Australia.
Norway, and none of this shit makes sense. I'm just here to talk about science, so god damn, we're talking about science. Let's get into it.
Love science. Oh shit.
Hello, welcome
This journey took him to his kitchen.
A kitchen.
A kitchen.
Yes, so I did a Bachelor of Science undergrad, so that's a 3-year program with a major in chemistry. Actually, technically, I did a double major in chemistry. Every single subject in the last year was chemistry, because biology doesn't make sense to me and scares me. This 3-year degree costs about...
It's also fake science.
$30,000. Somewhere in that ballpark. If you're a domestic student, you can put that on HEX, which is sort of a mostly interest-free loan from the government. But when you earn above a certain threshold, you have to start paying that HEX debt back. So you do go into debt quite significantly.
America has a similar national or federal assistance program called FAFSA. I'm sure basically anybody in high school who even had the notion of going to college was like encouraged to apply for that. unless you're like literally below the poverty line, and then I'm pretty sure knowing this country, even if you're below the poverty line, you're given like a pittance of money. Like you're given basically enough to cover maybe like a third of a state school tuition, which when I was going to college probably would have been about like 30 to $50,000 per year. And that's depending on what state this school is actually in, how good the economy is in that state versus the like another given one. Like I'm sure the California state school would be much more expensive than the fucking Missouri state school or something like that. um and FAFSA only covered like part of that. It was a pain in the ass to apply for. You had to apply for it all the time, and your main money you'd be getting was scholarships. I'm sure he's about to talk about still. I went to a university that had quite a steep price tag per year annually. And remember, this was in like 2016 dollars, of like somewhere in the ballpark of like 70K to like, I think by the time I graduated, in like the 80K per year area. And that's not because my family comes from money. No, 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 no. It's because I did enough scholarships type stuff to and was in like just the right money bracket to be like, hi, I would like mostly a full ride. And I tried to make a joke there. Basically, I got almost like a full ride from the college I went to, and the university, like, I basically only had like 10% of that left to pay off. And my father was kind of dedicated enough to work a shitload of overtime and basically pay that just as it came through. So I am one of like the 4 people in my cohort, my generational cohort, who's debt free. And it is such an immense privilege that I have to remind myself of it basically anytime I talk to another person in my age bracket. Um, but yeah, money is a huge barrier to entry to university. And sure, him with Australia, it's not as bad. Oh boy, here in America, that is an entirely different subject altogether.
For this degree, if you're an international student, not only do you not have access to HEX, it costs substantially more. It can cost a lot more, potentially even double. And you have to sometimes, for these subjects, pay up front. So that's something to be warned of. It is quite expensive to do these degrees. No lab experience, really. I mean, you do practicals, but you're not doing your own guided project for research in labs during that 3-year degree.
Usually you don't. I mean, for him, certainly. For me, it was kind of more like most of the undergrads definitely didn't bother with that shit. I happened to actually get into a because even if most of the time an undergrad ends up doing like some kind of research under somebody, and they join like a proper research lab, they basically kind of end up doing grunt work and maybe like the easiest possible project that like a grad student can think of that like they don't have time to do. But like, oh yeah, this this trained monkey basically could come in and mix a couple things together and maybe knock out a quick like presentation by the end of their little research stint. um I had an interesting experience where I actually was in a research lab, in quotes, of only undergrads, no grad students, no postdoctoral students. PIs were teaching lab professors. They weren't or just teaching professors. They didn't even really do the teaching labs themselves. They were lecturers, but they just had like a space in the back of the Gen Chem lab that wasn't really used very much, and just said, fuck it, we're gonna stick a couple kids back there and give them a basic idea, and basically give them time to just make errors and do all the easy things to fuck up on, so that way by the time they get to grad school, they're fucking up on the intermediate things, not the beginner baby problems.
And that's pretty standard in Australia. After the 3-year degree, I did a 1-year honours year, which is sort of an extra research orientated year. So you do a little bit more coursework, but you also complete a rather long research project, and you have to pick a lab to do that research project in.
Yeah, that's not how America does it. America's just like, here's 4 years of classes. If you decide to substitute some of your classes or your class credits with like maybe some research credits, you'll probably be able to do that in your 4th year. You'll have experience enough by then, but it's not an American thing otherwise.
For me, I did my honours year in a group looking at metal organic frameworks, which are big
Which are cool,
supermolecular
and we talked about in a
structures. It was
previous
great
React
because I
video.
got to do some inorganic chemistry, you got to do a little bit of organic chemistry to make the ligands for these, but also I got to do quite a bit of analytical techniques, which was good because it taught me a lot about microscopy and powder X-ray diffraction and a few other things that have been very useful throughout the rest of academia for me. That was good. That was my honours year. I chose that subject because I did a small research summer scholarship. It was really only 6 weeks or something like that. But if those things come up at your university, sometimes they're not very well advertised, but I would recommend that because you get to do a very, very small lab placement and see if you like both the research area, but also in the group's sort of way of working, and if the people there are friendly, and if you like the professor, and that can be a very good work environment.
Yeah, that was kind of like my experience too, in a way. Like I was, the two professors. I mean, the professors took to me because they saw like, oh wow, this kid's doing pretty well in the classes and seems pretty motivated. He wants to go to grad school. How about we actually like start getting him on some kind of research? Why isn't he applying to other labs? I'm like, I'm fucking busy and I'm dying over here. I don't have time to apply to another lab. And so then they're like, all right, we'll just throw you in with like our thing over here. We have like, you can practice and do some free roam stuff. And it started with just like a summer, you know, curious enough, had some free time, sorta, applied for a generic undergrad research grant, did some work, and didn't made minimal progress, but some progress, and it was enough to be like, okay, do you like this? Do you want to keep doing it? I'm like, yeah, I kind of do actually. This is like my baby now, and they're like, well, you can take this or enroll in this particular course for the quarter, and you will be able to continue doing research and get your credits for it, and it'll take up time in your schedule, so that way you have credits to graduate with. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool. That's better than taking some fucking some dipshit advanced class, or like a some election or elective credit or some shit like that. So count me in. um yeah, so it started like that for me, and it slowly lures you into the lab. And I liked the fact that I had a lab that was just undergraduates, basically just kind of running the show and doing a couple of things here, and just basically referring with their professors when needed. It was nice. It was, lower pressure. There's also less cynicism, which maybe I guess some grad student cynicism would have been good for me to understand what I was getting into. But it was a nice structure for me, and especially when it's just like you don't have somebody managing you constantly. I like that. I need breathing space when I'm doing work. I cannot be like constantly be checked in on and told what to do, and like, oh well, I need a status report every week and blah blah blah. It's like, no, just let me do my thing, and I'll come talk to you if I have an issue. And wow, it gets done. Crazy. Um, and I do agree with the text on screen right now. The choice of a good supervisor is just slightly more important than choosing a good topic, because the difference between a supervisor who has a style that you like working with, and a good personality, and a good work-life balance in their own life, um, and an understanding of your emotional needs, is much better than a professor who is an absolute bastard, expects you to work for free, nearly free as long as possible, um, and be in the fucking chemistry mines 27 hours a day, just because they have a topic that you are the most interested in. It's tricky too, because you usually, I mean, when you're applying to grad school, and now I'm getting ahead of the video probably, but like when you're applying to grad school, like you have no idea what the fuck the professors there are like. Like, you're applying to a grad school because you think that the research topics that you might get into are cool, but it could just turn out that everybody who has a topic that you like at the school you applied to is just a giant dick and will make your life hell for 5 years. So you're just kind of stuck at that point. It's like, well, either I do a research topic that I hate, or I, work in a lab that's gonna make me miserable. It sucks, but it's also kind of like applying for a job in that aspect. You usually like to apply for a job that, is something you think you like doing. But if your managers are idiots or, intrusive assholes, then it's not going to be a great time. But, you might actually enjoy working somewhere else that doesn't actually tickle your passions, but at least has some cool people around. It's unfortunate.
Whereas if you choose an area where everyone is mean to the new person and the professor just talks in riddles at you, then even if the subject area is of interest, then maybe it's not the best place to do work in. So I would recommend
You're like,
these very
well, I don't know. I
short-term
wouldn't do
lab placements if you can get
that.
them in
And they don't tell
undergrad
you what they
anyway.
would
So
do.
after honours, what can you do? A lot of people would do a master's degree, and actually that's kind of the way Australia is going, is actually kind of phasing out this honours year and replacing it just with a Masters of Research, which is an 18-month program. After you finish a Bachelor of Science honours, you technically can go straight into a PhD. So that's what I did. It was a little bit unexpected. I was applying for jobs. I was applying for a job at a fertilizer place.
That's interesting. This will be a shorter note because I'm also starting to realize we're 5 minutes into the video and we're 36 minutes into my stream and 5 minutes into this video. But again, very different from the American system. For whatever reason, it's a very both uniquely American and uniquely chemistry program thing. You do not apply to master's programs for chemistry departments in universities across America. I don't know why. Well, I kind of know why it is, but you will go directly from undergraduate to applying for a PhD program in, the school you're going to, and you basically do enough work for a master's along the way to, like, you did all your classes and you did TAing and you do some research in your first 2 years, and basically at that point after 2 years it's like, okay, you're either going to stick to your PhD track for another 3 years, or you are going to pull out, hit the escape switch, write a master's thesis on like the busted ass research that you kind of sorta got somewhere with over 2 years, and get your master's degree and get out. You don't go for a master's. The master's is the consolation prize. Don't know why that is here in America. I mean, I guess my guess is more that, like, you're not going to get very much research done in chemistry within 2 years, at least with the structure of how things are around here, because there are also differences between American research labs and, like, European research labs and how they structure their students' jobs. So that's, again, rabbit hole. So I guess it's more like, okay, apply for a PhD program so that way someone knows they can get at least 5 years of work out of you and, like, spend 5 years of time making a paper and, researching a subject and actually getting somewhere on something, rather than kind of like, you made like a few steps with like a master's degree.
A good job interview at a paint factory, but I got accepted into a PhD program.
They used to
My
be
particular
around.
PhD project was
They used to
using
pay
this
money.
big laser system, these lasers called optical parametric oscillators. So they're
I don't know
tunable
what that
lasers,
is.
and we were
I have no
detect
opinion on
fluorescence
that.
from naturally occurring items. So stuff for mining, and there was a bit of stuff for defense, so sort of explosive sensing. Most of my PhD was spent fixing and repairing and maintaining these lasers, because we were using these lasers, kind of cutting edge new lasers, very expensive. Getting them to work in a reliable way for what we wanted for these particular
Doing a
measurements
lot of
was
math to
quite
calculate
difficult. So we had this
refractions.
sort of big
Terrible.
control system that would try and take scans that were tens of hours long, and at one point we had 14 USB ports getting used and 3 Ethernet cables, and trying to get that to run for 20 hours straight to collect data every sort of 40 seconds was generally it would work well as long as you were sitting there watching it, but as soon as you left the completely dark basement to, I don't know, look at the sky or go home and sleep, it would like crash. So I have to say it did take me 6 years.
Science either really works when you're not looking. In fact, it sometimes works better than you think when you're not looking, where just all of a sudden the reaction happens when you leave it alone for several days, or it absolutely just, blows up in your face when you're not around to maybe fix something that went wrong with it.
Is to do the PhD. Now, I did the PhD over COVID, which was a little difficult. I could luckily still go into the lab, so I could keep doing experimental work, but it did have a lot of other challenges in terms of getting parts for repair or getting technicians out.
Yeah, I mean, I was just starting grad school during COVID, and oh boy, what a godsend that was, actually. The fact that I didn't have to travel to my classes, I could kind of just Zoom meeting my way through classes and like pay some attention, and also wake up like way too late, and also spend time like doing the adult household chores that I needed to do while having to listen to like lecture, or not even just lectures, but like seminars and other student presentations. It's just like, okay, I don't really need to hear this. Let me just go wash some dishes while like somebody talks about their fucking like PhD progress on shit fartium 4, the yellow complex. Like, all right.
I did pick up a researcher position that was sort of a little different than my PhD in the last year and a half. So I was kind of not actively working on the PhD too much in that last year. I had another job, so I was working on that job. And so it meant that I really turned a sort of a 5-year PhD into a 6-year degree by kind of just floundering around for last year, which is
research.
It was very relieving to have it finally submitted. So I've got the Bachelor of Science, the Honours degree, I've got the PhD, I've done 1 year of research work building sort of optical device prototypes, and then I changed positions to do my current postdoc, which is in semiconductor fabrication in a different group. So once again, physics department, but all I do is chemistry, basically. I do acid etchings, metal contacts, all this kind of stuff on.
You work at the most fun place on your university from a safety standpoint. I would know, because boy, I do not love having to deal with all that shit at my current job, but that's another rabbit hole for another day.
Mostly gallium arsenide wafers. I love arsenic now. I really love arsenic. This is all within the same university.
Oxides.
That is my journey. So there's a lot to take in there. First of
all
all,
within one university.
Kind of
That's
sped
kind of
run
nice,
getting
honestly.
to the PhD. If I'm not some sort of,
I don't know, but again, another American university thing. They really tend to encourage you to go somewhere else for grad school. I'm sure there's a less altruistic reason for it, but what they always tell you is that they want you to get a good experience, or a good broad experience, by going and seeing how other universities do it and building a new network of people, rather than getting entrenched and doing things the same way with the same people you know. Which, like, okay, sure, that is a useful skill. Also, I bet there's some kind of bullshit, like, tax reason why I can't just stay at the same fucking place.
mad genius or anything, but it's just sort of the fastest way to do things. I did very fast entry to the PhD, kind of slow exit to the PhD. A point that does come up quite a bit is if I'm doing cool science things at the university and I have a science YouTube channel, why don't I film more science things at the university? And I guess one way of putting it is it's like sleeping with your co-worker, right? It seems like a good idea at the time, but then the next day you go to work and everyone wants to tell you that they watched it, which is... It's nice if they told you that they enjoyed watching it. Half the time, people are just saying they watched it as if they felt obliged to watch it. You just assume that they hate-watched you for 45 minutes straight. Then if you do it more than once, work makes you start filling out forms, and that really kills the sexiness of the whole thing. So what if I talk about my postdoc work at the uni and everyone tells me it sucks and is pointless? Like, bro, that's my job. I need that.
I mean, most jobs suck and they're pointless, so you're kind of still coming out ahead.
Let's jump around a little bit, because I'm kind of already sick of talking about PhDs. I'm just getting flashbacks. Let's talk about journals.
Oh boy,
as a researcher at the university, whether a PhD student, master's, or a postdoc, your main output is papers. And these papers are published by journals. So I think before we talk specifically about scientific papers, we need to talk about journals. Journals are a thing that made sense a lot more, I think, 150 years ago, and have kind of been butchered into the modern age where they make a lot less sense and a lot more money.
Yeah, I mean, in the era where you actually had to subscribe to individual, like, newsletters, and you had to actually get print publications delivered to you, subscribing and to a journal and paying for, its access made more sense, because it had to facilitate the delivery of an actual physical product to your location. Nowadays, everything's just electronic. If the only purpose a journal serves is to basically separate your science into, a class that belongs to a certain journal, being like, you're in the upper echelon of being published in the Journal of American Chemical Science, or if you're really up there, you're actually being published in Nature Chemistry or Nature itself, and you're separated from the dregs of tetrahedron or something like that. So it's just about prestige now at this point, and of course, journals making a shitload of money from publishing your research.
If you imagine science in the 1800s, right, it's just a bunch of rich dudes and they want to communicate their science. So the way they do it is they send in letters or small bits about their science to a journal, which is like another rich guy who reviews them, looks at it and says, oh, is this correct or not? Does this peer review system? And if they're happy to publish it, then they will print that off and send it out to other scientists in the area. If you're a scientist in the area, you would subscribe to that journal, you would buy the print publication and read it, right? Okay, this all makes
physical
sense.
book.
In the modern era, it's kind of the same thing, except the journal doesn't really print anything and it's just PDFs on the internet.
Still features all those rich guys,
Sure.
too.
This overall system of like submitting it to an editor at the journal then sends it off to peer review, and if it gets past peer review, it then gets published in the journal where other people can read it. That system, that framework still exists in the modern era, but I think what makes it weird is the money, all right? You, as a researcher, you sit, you're at the start of the chain, and you get your money really most often from the government or other grants. So you do your research.
The lab gets a lot.
Expensive
You don't
in the
get
sciences,
very much.
but you do that research and then you send your article to the journal. The journal will then send that paper for peer review. Now, peer review is a volunteer process because the journals say if they're paid, then it will influence them badly. So it's a volunteer position. If it passes peer,
It's a volunteer position that you are basically voluntold to do as a part of being a professor. I don't know too much behind what actually goes into a professorship, but if you aren't doing peer review for, your peers in the field and reviewing their research, they are not going to take looking upon your research as kindly. And also, like, maybe your university has policies about how you need to review things. Maybe a journal is actually more friendly to you if you do a little bit of peer review process. So it's just something that if you are leading a lab at a university, you need to do peer review of other people's things. Not only is it the right thing to do, it's basically mandatory, even if it's not technically mandatory. Now, should it be paid? This is a different question. It is your labor, but there is some merit to being like, well, maybe you shouldn't get extra money for looking at more people's research papers, because then you could have an incentive of like maybe just passing through more of them and getting paid for that, and that's a whole other discussion.
you get the pleasure of paying the journal money for them to publish it, and then the journal will put it on the website. Other people can then pay to read.
You get no
People
kickbacks
ask
for
sometimes,
this.
they're like, oh, but some of that goes to the researchers. No, if you pay for a paper on a website, 100% of that goes to the journal. Money all flows towards the journal, and really the journal's only cost in this entire circumstance, even though it's expensive research, they've got reviewers, experts in their field, really the only cost is hiring an editor and like hosting a single PDF on their website. And like you think, oh yeah, okay, sure, but you know, you get a lot of grant money, so how much can this possibly cost? You surely don't care about the cost.
You'll
for
get
these
more
things.
grant
Well,
money
the
from more
cost
publications.
to publish an article in some of the good journals, like high reputation journals, can exceed $10,000 US.
Oh my
If you're at an
God.
institution, you can read often most of these journal articles for free, right? You have access to them, but you only have access to that because your university likely pays in excess of $10 million a year to be able to access these journals. So
They're making a killing.
people often ask the question, how do I know if the journal is a scam or not? And that's a bit of a trick question because all journals are scams, right?
Based.
If you don't feel like you're getting scammed at least a little bit somewhere in this process, it's not a real journal.
Yeah.
It's a crazy system.
If they only ask you to pay $50 to publish, then it's like you may as well just be asking your neighbor Dave to like tack your research onto his fucking billboard in his garage or something like that. But if they're asking you for, several $1,000s so that way they can make a PDF free, or, a PDF behind a paywall for other people, then, oh yeah, that's a journal right there. You're paying for nothing. That's how you know it's class.
They have like some of the highest profit margins of any company in the world, and Elsevier made like $3 billion last year. It's just ridiculous. And you do all the work for them for free, even though they make $3 billion. You can't not publish a paper. That's the thing. You can't be like, oh, I'm too good for the system, because like your job's metric is based on publishing papers and paying these companies, right? And often these really high fees come with this thing.
It's not like you can just send your research copies of all your research summaries to all of your peers, because your peers who do research in your field are global. So, and you don't know all of them. So, like, what are you gonna do? Just send. You can't reply all to, well over several thousand people on an email who you've never even met before, and just be like, "Here's my research." They'll be like, "Why the fuck are you messaging me? How did you get this email? I am from ancient Greece."
Called open access, which is like this thing that the journals have invented because like they need you to pay more for them hosting a single PDF, right? And open access is like, oh, well then people don't have to pay to view it, so you pay them $10,000 and then
you
people
can pay more to
get
rid of the paywall.
And according to the journals are like they get more citations and help advance your career if you pay this. But like, of course they're gonna say that because they want $10,000 from you. And I suppose if I describe it as a predatory system, you and your conspiracy theories would probably be like, I bet it was invented by someone connected to the Epstein files. What a conspiracy theorist. Oh no, it was Maxwell's dad.
Yeah.
Okay. I will say it's a bit of an art.
Just sit with that one for a little while. Let it marinate. Let it seep into your brain for a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, life is hell. You're right. I agree. No, it's not good either. Yeah, I know, the French nobles and guillotines and everything for less. I understand. I feel you.
Form picking a journal for your science, because you do a little bit of science and say you discover a new species of squirrel. Let's go. You're a squirrel researcher and you've discovered Squirrel 2, right?
Hold on. That image appears on screen for too little time to not pause on it. Squirrel 2 in wonderful Microsoft clip art text. Women fear me, fish want me. Radioactive green squirrel with Wolverine claws. And apparently 2 NVIDIA 5000 series fucking graphics card stapled onto it. That's a cool ass squirrel in my book. Does it run Doom? It probably runs Doom. I don't know how well it runs Doom, but it would probably be pretty hard to get a hold on.
Right, okay, I don't know, but what colors are squirrels? I know nothing about squirrels. You can try and
Clearly
get your research in a really, really high reputation, kind of high esteem journal. And the metric that the journals use to value themselves is a thing called impact factor. A really good impact factor really changes between disciplines, but over 10 is generally a very good impact factor.
Yeah, number of citations a journal has divided by the number of papers they published. Basically, it's a measure of your ratio of how often do people cite the work in a journal versus the number of times they publish a journal or they publish a paper. So how much of a quote unquote impact, how many other people are reading and citing papers published in this journal. And so the high prestige journals try to only publish the most solid of science that's like super, groundbreaking and really well documented. So that way they keep a ludicrously high impact factor. So that way they can say, like, look, if you get into our journal, that means that you are in the upper echelon of papers that are highly read, highly cited, and a part of a small elite club.
So it means that, on average, a paper there has been cited 10 times in the past. Of course, you can be lower than 1, and those are generally very bad journals because, on average, a paper there will not be cited. No one really thinks it's a good scheme, but at least it's one metric that all the journals will kind of give you to kind of benchmark between it. So you've got your Squirrel 2 paper. You can try and go to one of these big multidiscipline journals which have very, very high impact factor. So we're talking about Nature or Science or something like that. Really, you have to make a case for why, Squirrel 2 research is interesting to all researchers from all disciplines. It's very hard to get
wants to Squirrel 2.
Those kind of journals. But the problem is you can also go the other way too much. You can go to like Australian Journal of Squirrel B, and no one reads the Journal of Squirrel B. So once again, it's kind of lost all its meaning, these journals, because they're all PDFs on the internet. But there is sort of still a level of, I guess, reputation. The idea of this high reputation is kind of like the bar of peer review. So it's easier to get the paper published in a kind of a lower tier journal. So it's kind of assumed that you have lower tier research, and that's not.
It's kind of like, in a weird sense, it's kind of like all the, video and streaming platforms. Like, I'm sure your content is probably in a little bit of a higher tier if it's like on, has all the fancy works of being on like Nebula or something, a paid service like that. Though I mean, who the fuck's actually buying that? I don't think anyone is, because we're all annoyed by the advertisements. Whereas like kind of your regular, like, yeah, moderate impact stuff, people are uploading on YouTube and they might make it, they might not, and then you kind of dig down further by like what their subscriber count is and see how, important or relevant they are based on like the ratio of their view count to their subscriber count kind of thing. Um, and then you also have like the dregs of like, yeah, I could probably be like #1 on Vimeo if I really wanted to be, but like, who the fuck wants to be #1 on Vimeo?
Correct, but that's just kind of the way of thinking. So once again, you kind of have to work out where your research sits best, and you're trying to get it into the best journal you can, but also like in a reasonable time frame, because sometimes journals can take like over a year to decide how to publish a research, especially if they can't find peer reviewers, or you can't find peer reviewers. Did I mention that part?
They go sleepy.
Like the one thing the journal does, apart from posting your PDFs online.
Did that actually, hold on, I don't think that registered on the mic. I did the honk shoe me kind of thing. I don't know if that picked up. Anyways,
and is
I
like
embarrassed
finding
myself
other
by doing
peer
it the second
reviewers.
time.
But these days, when you submit a paper, the journal also asks you to find your own peer reviewers and submit suggested reviewers. And then the journal just
sorry, I have to listen to it again. You're really?
Online is like finding other peer reviewers. But these days, when you submit a paper, the journal also asks you to find your own peer reviewers and submit suggested reviewers. And then the journal just emails the people that you suggested.
Why? I didn't know that. That's the dumbest thing in the world. The whole point of a peer review is supposed to be that it's like blind, so that way you can't like just pick the people who are going to be like looking at your research. That's the dumbest thing I've ever possibly fucking heard of. That's the whole like basis of like science or peer review is supposed to be double blind. You don't know who's reviewing your paper, and the person reviewing your paper doesn't know who they're reviewing. They're just giving it anonymously. They could probably guess based on what the research is, but they can't be quite so sure. Why on earth would you be able to select your fucking researchers? Oh, right, that's because this whole system was made by Robert Maxwell. Okay, it all makes sense now. It's just bullshit anyways.
It's fine. Also, another thing a journal did to one of my papers that was like very recently, it was like maybe only 4 years ago, there was a color printing charge, $50, $80 or something like that for color printing charge.
Yes,
and you're like, oh, I didn't realize
rainbow
things still
pixels
got
are so much
printed.
more.
And it's like, no,
so much more expensive.
It was never going to get printed. But if you don't pay the $50 or $80, then they just make your PDF black and white. And then your paper's just online in black and white forever. So yeah, you kind of just have to find a journal that's like appropriate for your squirrel research. Not too niche, but not too broad, but also a good reputation. And every year they just keep inventing new journals because it's just a modern world. So every company is just trying to see how much reputation they can burn in the name of profits. Who cares about the future kind of thing? Even a really good sort of like high prestige journal such as Nature then makes kind of lower tier nature journals because it still has the word nature in it.
In journals much worse than these appear every day also. Yeah, I mean, having the various nature journals, I mean, that one makes a little bit more sense just to divide it up a little bit because the main nature journal is like, meant to be for the best of the best, the cream of the crop kind of elitism. And as a result, it might not actually reach your peers as much. If you wanted to actually reach people in your field, then yeah, maybe one of these sub-journals is better, but I still get what he's talking about, though. It's a little bit of a racket. Also, I love how the Nature Cancer edition is like, to me, it looks like one of the most removed possible things from a fucking cancer study possible. It just looks like a fucking round robin bracket, or like meant to be a mother father kind of lineage track. Anyways, off topic.
Nature squirrels. Too, and you'd be like,
fucking
I published my
squirrel
research in a fucking nature journal, and to be like, well, that's pretty good. Nature squirrels too, with an impact factor of 0.3. It cost me $25,000. What am I doing here? I just want to look at squirrels. I get so excited when I see a squirrel overseas. I'm such a goddamn tourist. Anyway, that's journal. What's a paper? The easiest part I find of writing a scientific paper is doing the science. Do the experiments, make the graphs, make cool figures. You do that, and then you're like, okay, we have to write a paper.
I haven't wrote an actual paper, but writing my master's thesis. felt actually a lot easier than doing the science behind it, because the science behind it has this problem where it just doesn't work half the time, and it usually decides not to work when you're already having a shitty week and suffering from imposter syndrome. Whereas the paper might just have typos and errors, but like as long as you're summarizing the work that actually did function correctly, did actually produce a result, then life's fine. It just takes a horrid amount of time, and it's a mind-numbingly boring task.
And then it all gets very difficult, I think. Sure, the writing of the text is quite difficult because you want it to be information dense but still readable. Well, at least I care about readability. I read a lot of papers where they obviously have not cared to make it readable. But also, it's kind of a big group project a lot of the time. A big group project that has no deadlines, and you have to also work with professors and sometimes several professors who change each other's drafting things. So you go through like draft final version 4, draft final, and then the professors start correcting their own corrections, and you have to be like, this is fine. We're going to submit it. We're going to submit it.
Why did you ask for it this way then?
4 weeks' time,
you're going to complain about it.
Of course, you also have to choose a journal. So you have to choose a journal which you kind of hate the least. But also, I think one of the hardest parts about writing a paper is trying to round it off well, or like come up with a good story. You can just keep going forever and you keep thinking, oh, this is going to be the greatest paper, this is going to be the most impactful paper of all time, so you want to do more and more experiments, but then you check the journal guidelines and they say, well, you can only have 6 graphs in this paper anyway, so
yeah, you have to know when to stop
the work, but you also don't want to cut down the work too much so that you...
It's not like you're not going to publish more papers when you're in grad school anyways. You're going to continue your same research and keep going with it. So, like, you know, no point in just stopping or no point in, you know, making your paper a forever paper. Just, like, have a quick topic, find a molecule you made that has a application and is like, oh, yeah, wow, we made this, and this application exists, and it's different than the other things in that it's comparable to. And that's the end of that paper. Time to, you know, reuse 70% of the work for paper number 2, because now I'm just making, instead of molecule, you know, C, I'm going to make molecules D and E, and they do these other applications that are similar but different, and tell another story, and that's another paper you could publish, and just keep fucking doing that until you, like, hit one that is like, oh, this is like a holy grail kind of, like, compound we've been looking for. It does something that's actually like really important and could maybe even be picked up by like industry one day. Then you write a nice big paper fleshing out a whole lot of things about this complex and how you made it, and you know all the intricacies behind it. That's when you put in your all. Otherwise, just, you know, dust it up, submit it, make a short story, and you're done. Of course, short stories don't make it into Nature, but you know you can at least make it into like fucking, you know, a standard journal like Organometallics or something.
Only do this one tiny experiment and then publish it, because then journal's going to think, well, this is nonsense. You've hardly done any novel work. Having that knowledge of when is a section of work a good paper is very, very difficult. And that's true for experimental work. It's true for theoretical work, because theoretical work you can just keep going on and you've got this idea, but how do you prove it? Oh, maybe we need computer simulations.
So of course, sometimes it's your AI who decides when a story is done, not you.
Back, but then sometimes you get disappointed if you submit it too early and it's just a little bit and it goes in a sort of a lower tier journal. It's quite a difficult balance to walk. If you're new to postgrad or you're thinking about postgrad, papers are one of those things where it's so hard to think, like, what am I going to do a paper on? You think that you have to start this PhD and have an idea for a paper. That's generally not how I think you should go about it.
That's not how anything works.
That has a research direction and they know where they're going and they know what the novel research they're working towards is. So it generally comes very naturally. But I think also it's nice to be able to do experiments, do interesting things, things you're interested in, things that you think might be novel, and then reflect on them and think like, yes, this will make a good paper if I just complete this little section and, you know, do one little extra bit. I think if you have an idea,
talking as a man that has never actually published a genuine paper, although his name is technically co-first author on a paper that people who still were in the lab after he got his master's thesis said, fuck this, I'm out, did actually get published. Where's it going with this? Fuck, I already forgot where I was going with this. Hold on, I have to go back in the video because I let him ramble for a couple seconds.
Nice to be able to do
oh, right. I was going to say, we're like, yeah, you don't have an idea of, like, what you're actually what your individual research project idea is before you get into, as you get into your research group, or as you apply to get into grad school. Like, maybe you have an idea of, I wanna change the world, my final message, chemistry. But soon the practicalities of research will, and just what a group is researching is going to kind of forcibly narrow down your dreams into something else, a lot more distilled, a lot smaller of a package, and a lot more incremental of a development. And I don't. That's not to say for the worst necessarily. Like, science is built on the shoulders of giants. You are just building on the shoulders of giants, a little bit more as you get into your program. I mean, for me, I'm not going to divulge too much of my research just because I don't want people going fucking crazy detecto mode and trying to figure out who I am. But I knew when I wanted to do graduate research work, I wanted to work in kind of something relatively sustainability field focused, and working on catalysts with metal compounds and stuff is a kind of great direction of well, you can do things with fewer reagents, you can use less toxic metals, you can use metals that don't take as much energy to mine out of the earth, they just are more stubborn to get the chemistry done with. And it's I think that doing the research topic that I was interested in was oh yeah, this general lab has the whole ethos that I'm going for, and I'll kind of figure out something after I'm here, working on it. And I did have an idea to maybe actually go with my PhD thesis with oh, actually, I want to use these metals for this reason and try it on these reactions because I think it'll actually work. Because this metal is good for binding to this atom on this group, and the other metal is good for binding to this, and the other metal's on that, and it'll just kind of, work out and come together in theory in my head. I never got to test it because grad school is too much for me, but that's just kind of how grad school mentality or the research mentality comes about. It develops slowly, naturally over time. Your big hotshot ideas need to get refined down into something that's a lot more focused on what a given lab's research is doing or can do, and what they know.
And do one little extra bit. I think if you have an idea of what a paper is before starting the experiments, that's not the correct way to do science. You just let the papers come naturally, which is
also, hold on,
so easy to say in hindsight. I've worked on
well, I thought I was going to say something else. I thought I was going to say, which it feels very opposite of the scientific method, because, as you're told, in class, it's usually well, you come up with a hypothesis and you test it, and then you already have an idea of well, if this is this, then it proves that the fucking pink flamingo is actually the strongest bird native to the Key Island, the Key Lime Islands, or whatever the fuck. I don't even know my own geography, let alone anything about flamingos. But you kind of start with an idea at first, but you really develop the story as you make the paper. You're at least in chemistry, you're kind of more okay, I know that generally I'm working with something that's trying to make the world a more sustainable place, and we do this for these reasons. But then you end up just fucking around with the molecules for a while until it's oh shit, this one does something useful, and then you just start saying a story about yes, we set out to make this molecule because it was useful for this specific reaction that industry definitely uses often, and this could save us 31 giga megawatt hour pounds of shit fuckium. It's just okay, yeah, sure, this is the story that we're going with. I definitely didn't just screw around in lab messing with chemicals until I found something that actually was useful rather than just fun. So the whole paper writing process is just weird and kind of reversed, and you end up telling the story retroactively as if you were totally intending to do this rather than stumbling into it and being oh yeah, this actually does work this way. Oh, it's kind of like lying to lying to your parents or something about well, why did you do this thing, and you come up with this totally crazy tale about how, like, well, actually, it's very useful for these skills in my future, and like, if I volunteer here, I'm gonna be able to get an internship at this job, and that's gonna pay me lots of money, and I might be able to get a scholarship too. When the real reason is, like, you think the secretary there is hot or something. You just want to work there to be around her or something stupid like that. Um, you come up with some bullshit reasons that are like, well, they're true, but they're not your main motive. That was never your original story. You just can't tell your parents the original story, otherwise they're gonna fucking hit you over the head. Well, maybe they're better than that. Anyways,
papers for years. I have drafts of papers that potentially will never be submitted, that I did the experiments 4 or 5 years ago, and I've spent countless hours generally on these papers, and I don't think they'll ever be submitted for various reasons.
don't worry, the next grad student will like pick up your research,
it's
Tom, and finish
journey,
it, and you'll get second author.
But it's a fantastic feeling when you finally submit a paper. Well, potentially more fantastic when the paper is finally accepted, because you have to go through this reviewer process, right? So you choose a journal, you do their shitty online web portal that looks like it was made in the 1990s, and you upload your PDF, and you've got a supplementary info, which is all the shitty graphs that you couldn't put in the original manuscript. And then you submit a sort of cover letter which says, oh, my paper's so good, such a weird thing to do in the modern age. Then it goes to the editor first,
get into
and
the journal.
editor
Please let me
decides
pay you
very
thousands
quickly
of dollars.
often, is this right for the journal, or is it right for maybe another journal within the same sort of journal family? Or they can sort of do this, what's called this desk rejection, where they just kind of say, this is totally not good enough for
this is shite.
That desk rejection can happen very quickly, the same day sometimes, if you aim at a really high tier journal for a work that you're kind of like, oh, it could be cool, maybe they'll accept it, and then the editor just like rejects it the same day. You try and take that
Says you
not
fucking
too personally.
nematode, get out of here.
We submitted a paper, and we're really excited, of course. We worked on this paper for ages, so we sent someone to go get cake, and it got desk rejected like within half an hour. So actually it got rejected before the person came back with the cake to the lab. So they came back with the cake and were like, nah, paper's already rejected.
And get back to you that fast for a rejection.
If it does get accepted by the editor, it goes to these 2
anything.
reviewers. It's generally 2. Sometimes it's 1 if they really cheap out. Sometimes it's 3 if they're like psycho. It can take a couple months sometimes. Sometimes it's only a couple of weeks for the reviewers to write their comments and bring it back to you. A lot of people get very scared by this. I sort of enjoy it in a sort of sadistic way. Kind of one of the few times in your life that you're so objectively judged for your work, because they're anonymous and they don't know you well, or they don't know you at all except by your last name, and they will...
Or, unless it's a journal that allows you to select your peer reviewers, in which case then they absolutely know who you are and you know who they are.
Write a review of your paper and say whether it's good or not. Sometimes they're mean, which is a bit ridiculous. I mean, I've reviewed
a lot of
papers.
PIs are just fucking mean.
Rejected every single paper I've reviewed, which is harsh, but harsh but fair. They're all very bad papers. I'm still not mean about it.
Yeah, bad to you.
About it. So often people will reject without being too mean. They'll say it's out of scope, or say that it's not quite adequate for the journal. But sometimes they'll say, this is fantastic work, which is great, because they have no reason to say that apart from them thinking that is fantastic work. Actually, my favorite reviewer comments aren't like the really aggressively positive ones. It's the ones that are like somewhat negative reviews, but then don't want to be mean. So they'll say, this is poor writing. It's not of interest to the journal. It has no impact. Recommendation, publish. The reviewers will come back with...
Yeah, sometimes other researchers understand that it's like, sometimes your lab is just publishing things to publish things, because it is publish or perish in academia, and if you keep putting out papers in decent impact journals, you're going to keep getting grants, and you're going to keep getting new graduate students, and the department's going to continue to fund you. So sometimes I imagine you might get the this shit sucks. Full send it anyways. You need this, bud. I got you.
Their comments, and because there's 2 of them, then the editor kind of gets a say between them. And the classic thing is that reviewer 1 will be like, great paper, and then reviewer 2 will be like, this made my life worse by reading it. The editor will be like, well,
I've heard that.
We'll reject your paper. Assuming that they kind of like it, they can accept without revisions, which is a myth, has never happened.
Never happens.
Minor revisions, the odd experiment, minor spelling things, or like formatting, which is completely fine. Like, that's the one you want. It shows that they've actually read it. Major revisions, that's a bit bit of a rarer one because generally the editor will not accept big errors with your science, or they can reject it and say, oh, this will be good in a different journal, you know, that's more targeted. So generally like lower tier, less reputation, but at least it can still be published. I had a paper on up conversion in glass, tried to send it to a fancy laser journal because we were using lasers, and the laser journal said this is not really for us. It should really go to a glass chemistry journal or like a glass material journal, which is kind of more specific, and so it's got less impact factor, less reputation, but it's still probably the appropriate decision, and I think that's where we ended up publishing that work. So not every paper needs to be like revolutionizing the field. You can just do small increments. So you publish
most things
paper.
are incremental.
It's a great feeling, and it's also a great feeling when you get a citation, because that means someone else has published a paper and they've referenced you. It's often background citations where it's like, oh, other people have done this work, reference 2 to 7, and your reference 4, which is still great because, you know, it shows that you're in the field and people are reading your paper and taking sort of
acknowledging that you exist and that your like science isn't bullshit. Although it is funny, like for my personal experience, when I had to write my master's thesis, and it is published but not in a journal. That's master's theses and PhD theses are like a whole separate like realm of publishing. But like me writing my introduction to like be like, well, you see that metallic and organometallic catalysts have a large background. Here is this blah, 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 and there are examples from these, and these groups, and this group does this, this, and this, and that kind of is similar to what we're doing, but not exactly because it misses X, Y, and Z, and oh, this group has like a similar structure, but they're using it to catalyze A, B, and C instead, and it's just like, did I read every word of those like first 30 citations in my paper? You know, who's to say, really? I definitely read the abstracts, and I looked at the pretty graphics, and I know that their names were mentioned a lot at our group meetings. So like they are relevant. It's just like, you know, the whole background part of the paper, the starting things off for like people who don't know nothing about what we're doing. You know, that's not really my focus. That's not where I want to put my heart and soul. You know?
Occasionally you'll get a citation that's like, as shown by you, your last name, et al, whatever, and it's like, that's me. And I've even had one which was very interesting work, or like fantastic, I can't remember the reading, but they were like, this is really good work, and then cited in an academic journal, which is like, it's a fantastic feeling, you know. I've never had one that's cited me that's like as incorrectly stated by, I mean, it still counts as a citation. So does the good feeling of getting a citation justify all the work that you had to put in to get this paper over the line? I mean, you just have to say yes, because, you know, that's
some
life,
cost,
right? Sometimes you publish a paper and it gets no citations, and that's a bit of a weird feeling. You do novel things and it's interesting and it excites you because it's like, that's your job. Fuck it if only 50 other people read it.
Yeah, I'm sure the fucking paper that I have a co-first author on is like, I know it has a couple citations because I've gotten emails about it. I'm pretty sure all the citations have either A, been my group citing its own papers to say, look at the paper trail that we have and all the research we put into this field, or B, other groups and other people doing the same shit I just said I was doing for my master's thesis, and like looking at it like, you know, enough, but not really caring about the exact details inside of it. They just need to do it so they can actually get to their own paper.
I mean, you don't do it for the citations, but
you do it for the citations. You do it for the fame.
It certainly helps. The other reason you submit papers as a PhD student is so that you can graduate. And I will say, in a lot of countries, a lot of universities, there is a minimum requirement for papers. At least one, sometimes it's 2 to 3. Of course, if you get a paper in a very high impact journal during your PhD, that can count a lot more than 2 or 3 papers in a lower tier. In Australia, all the universities I know don't have publication metric for the PhD. As long as you submit your thesis and the thesis is good, you don't actually have to have any published papers to graduate from your PhD.
Yeah, no, here in America, that's not the case. It's very much you need a couple papers to publish, and a couple. You need to publish a couple of papers at any given university worth its salt in grad school. to graduate with a PhD in here in America. Um, and more often than not, the minimum is like somewhere around 2 to 3 papers. But then your PI has this just unexplainable incentive to try to milk everything that you're worth out of you for the 5 years that you're there at minimum, and then maybe say that like, oh, but you know so much about this topic, and you're so good at it, and like you've published these papers already. Why don't you just finish this next one thing and publish a paper? And then there's this loose end too. You want to like maybe shore that up before you go, and oh, but like you just discovered this thing on accident. Like you need to look at that. Like that would be so cool if you looked at that before you left. And sooner or later, I've heard you get sucked in for like 7 years to publish several more papers to make your professor all the more happy and make their resume and prestigious list of papers that they have names on longer. So don't get caught in that trap. If your professor is trying to catch you in that trap, because ultimately your professor in America has to be the one to say that, oh yeah, they're ready to graduate with their thesis. Bring it up to the department head. Usually the department head or someone in the department, like, they are or were a research professor themselves, but usually they end up being more of a neutral party for this, because it's like, well, that's not my research student. If it was my research student, maybe I'd be trying to milk them for all they're worth, but like that's not mine. You should let your student graduate, so that way you can let my students do way more papers at the very least. If your department head is your PI, then talk to the dean. I don't know at that point.
It certainly helps because your thesis also goes to reviewers, and the reviewers are quite thorough generally and hopefully not mean. So the same thing happens with your thesis as does a paper, except the thesis doesn't go to a journal, it just goes in the university's repository or something like that. If you publish like 4 or 5, sometimes you can just do thesis by publication, which is you saying like, I made a good enough contribution, you write a little introduction, and then they give you your PhD because you've already made enough contribution to science. And so for my thesis, I did not a thesis by publication and not a conventional thesis, which is just like, 150, 200 pages of written word. I did a
Also, you did just hear that, right? 150 to 200 pages of written word as an expectation for getting a PhD published. My master's thesis, I believe, was exactly 99 pages when I finished it. And, for master's theses that got people their master's degrees, that was a little bit above and beyond expected. Now, granted, I'll also say that, like, maybe about 30 of those pages or so were citation pages and also supplementary graph pages and stuff like that. And the whole thing was double spaced as was requested. But, I saw certainly some master's publications from our group previously that were more in the, like, maybe like 50-page range or so. But wouldn't you know it, every single one of those was kind of implied by our PI and said directly by my coworker grad students that they were, what's the word, shit. My PI had in fact talked to some of like my coworkers when I wasn't there, and I was taking a break from the actual lab to just go do some writing. And when I would come back to the lab for the occasional thing I needed to check on, they would actually tell me like, oh yeah, no, so-and-so, our boss actually said like you had really good writing and it was good here and there. It's like, oh wow, saying that outside a closed door, or they're saying that when I'm not there too, and my back's turned. Very nice.
combination thesis, so I had some publications and then the rest of it was written. So good reason to publish papers. If you're in your PhD and you can publish 4 papers, you don't have to write a thesis. generally, that's pretty good. That's
That
pretty good
must be
motivation.
nice.
But, you know, sometimes it's easier to write a thesis than submit 4 papers. I'm sure there's lots of Germans watching this and they're like, the university won't let us graduate until we've published 7 papers, redefine an entire field. And it's like, there should be a minimum, I think, you know, maybe 1 paper. But if they say, you've got to submit at least 3, it kind of drives this big problem with papers at the moment, which is people just care about publishing and they don't care about the quality of the work. There's all these things about paper mills and a lot of stuff, you know, gets published. It's just not interesting. Or they'll do this concept called slicing, where you kind of, instead of publishing 1 kind of good paper, you divide the work into 3, and then you publish 3 nearly identical papers in different journals. So say,
I definitely didn't suggest that earlier, right? No, couldn't have been that I suggested that earlier. No, you wouldn't do it. I wouldn't have done that. No, I mean, I did suggest something kind of along those lines earlier, but like, if your things are related compounds, but they do different things, you know, you can argue that those are worth separate papers, especially if they end up, you know, being like, well, this is more appropriate for this niche journal instead. Again, off topic, rabbit hole.
You want to look at upconversion in glass. A good paper might be making 4 different types of glass and comparing the response. If all you cared about was, I need 3 papers this year, then you could do maybe a paper just on the experimental setup and put that in some sort of weird methods journal, and then do this glass as 1 paper, and then I'm going to do a different glass and cite the other paper, and then you get 3 or 4 papers out of 1 kind of good paper. It's just not a great way to do science. It's silly. If you've already done the work, you shouldn't just be like dividing it up and do as many papers as you possibly can. But if the university is saying like, well, no, you can't graduate until you've had 3 papers, of course you're going to be motivated to, that's it, the papers. It's great. It's a lot of work. That's what you're there for. You're there to write papers, and it's so rewarding. I mean, that's the word, really. It feels good. It's rewarding. That's it. Publishing papers. How hard could it be? Answer, reasonably hard. There are 2 more things we need to cover before we can answer the question of should you do a PhD, and they're both related to money. In a second, I'm going to be talking about your pay, so, you know, prepare yourself for that bit. Now, I want to...
Yeah, that's, you need to fucking grab a drink to hear about how little the grad students are paid. Now's your one and only opportunity to do so.
Talk about the group's money and funding. Funding is the thing that drives research. You do research to get funding, and then once you have funding, it demands you do certain research. So you do that research and then try and get more funding. You need money to do things. And this funding comes really primarily, if you're a university group, through government grants. That doesn't mean all the money comes from the government. In fact, a lot of government grants require
us to have to write all these grants and try to, you know, convince the powers that be to give you money, please. Give me money. And it might not just be the government itself. It might be government plus whoever the hell they're actually getting the money from.
Now, you do want to do a PhD in a group that has significant funding. I'm not going to say excessive funding. The group doesn't have to be trillionaires, but you do want funding in your group when you do your PhD.
You want a group that can actually pay you to do the research,
travel, it can
rather
buy
than
you
make you do
equipment
TA
that you need for your PhD. Equipment breaks down, you need repairs. If the group has no funding, then as you do your PhD, you just sort of sit around with broken equipment, waiting for grants to come through.
And, you know, even if you your group does have funding and your equipment breaks, usually they'll just try to, you know, jerry-rig a solution so that way they could say, no, I've had this UV vis spec, I've had this UV lamp since the 1970s. We have to keep it around. It still works. It's still good. I mean, for fuck's sake, today at work, I literally saw, and I mean, it hasn't been used for a little bit, mostly because the PI died a little while ago. But there was a fucking Kenmore microwave from 1979 that was used for drying molecular sieves. Yeah. I mean, you could just buy a normal microwave, you know, now. One that's probably way more, like, energy efficient, has much better distribution of, you know, the microwaves inside of said microwave oven. But, nah, fuck it. We just gotta keep the annoying thing with, like, paddles and a analog dial and probably no fucking backlight in there. Because it still works, damn it.
getting grants, it means that they're doing a research direction that someone cares enough about to fund, or, they've convinced the government that it's worth doing enough to have money to do. Not saying that groups without significant funding aren't doing interesting research, but often the better experience comes from groups that have more funding. And that sucks because funding is hard to get, and funding primarily goes to people who already have money. But that's the modern world.
Capitalism.
Money just goes to the rich people. What can you do? A trap that you can fall into when you are looking to do a PhD is you've got an exciting project, or you've heard about an exciting project, and they want you to start the PhD, and then they'll say, yes, and once you've started, we can apply for funding. That'll let you continue to do all the things that you need to in your PhD. It's a bit of a trap because you're never guaranteed to get funding. You're never guaranteed. It's always an element of lottery in these grant rounds, and every grant round. And also, the timescales on getting funding can be really long. In the group that I was in, we've had grants that we've won. They've said, congrats, you've won the grant. We are going to give you this money. All it needs is a certain minister to sign off on it, and then we will transfer you the money. And it takes like 8 months for that minister to do a signature on a bit of paper that allows them to transfer that money. I've submitted big money grants that have taken a year to review. 14 months later, they're like, oh, we didn't really like your submission. And it's like, bro, I don't even remember what I wrote. If a group has a little bit of money, a little bit of equipment, happy to spend some stuff on travel, your experience as a PhD student, I think, is a lot better. Of course, as always, there's levels of complexity to that. So the group I was in really focused on commercialization, which I'll get to. If you can have a lot of industry partners, you can sometimes generate a lot of funding if there's significant interest in your research. But the catch of that is often the industry partners won't want you publishing as much. If you publish it, then it can't be patented.
They want to They want to keep it trade secret so that way they can have an advantage over their competitors. I guess it'd be a good point to jump in with, again, my experience of like, I was in a group that was like of moderate size, had a fair amount of cash flowing into it, but not crazy amounts. But for one reason or another, we always seemed to research beyond our means just a bit, and we had people who were pretty late into their grad school careers still fucking TAing and wasting time they could be spending on research by teaching the next generation. Imagine that. But, doing it for pennies on the dollar. Instead of being paid by fucking grant money. So, yeah, it was a stupid experience. I never got to just be paid on the graduate student stipend for, or I never got to be paid off of a grant because I didn't stick around that long. I got paid off of TAing, and it sucked.
Be used as easily by the company to make money. The other thing is, and I don't know if this is the case in other countries as much as it is in Australia, but it's definitely the case in Australia, a lot of PhD groups and PhD scholarships themselves, which we'll talk about soon, a lot of those are funded through defence. And there's a problem with Australia, and that is no one cares about R&D. No one cares about research and development, not industry, and especially not the government. I know this might come across as a little bit controversial, but you can quote me on this. Australian government does not give a rat's ass about R&D. I'll be honest. The industries, like mining, R&D might as well stand for rat dick. Because they don't give a rat dick fuck about R&D. This might seem out of pocket because you're like, well, there's heaps of government grants. There's all this money all the time. And it's like, no, they don't care about R&D. They care about commercialization. The government only wants to take good ideas that have some promise and like accelerate them into where they can be taken up by industry. And industry don't want to sponsor R&D. I mean, the D in R&D stands for development, but I'm really talking about like fundamental research. Like no one wants to fund fundamental research. It's all just like fucking, what is the economic impact of this? What is this economic impact going to be of this research? And it's like, with all due respect, Grant Portal, what is the economic impact of me spitting in your mouth? Like, let's be honest, if I knew...
well, depending on who you ask, it might motivate them to work a little harder. Our group was doing kind of fundamental research, but we always gave it the spin of like, but if we get it to work though, this will be saving everyone money, because if we work with these metals that are cheap and abundant in the Earth's crust, that means that you can buy them for cheap and do your work on the cheap and have a bigger profit margin. Yes, we'll feed the machine for science.
knew this idea was going to make so much goddamn money, I could just take out a payday loan and do it myself. No, we should be funding risky, novel research at the base level. That's what universities should be doing. You should be doing low-level research.
Everyone else should be doing the precise shit for money.
Coming to a university group and being like, hey, we'll give you funding for a year, but at the...
But, you know, the private sector loves to outsource their work to the public sector, you know, instead of the other way around, like, you know, how neoliberalism was pitched. A rabbit hole.
End of the year, we want a prototype, we want it to take it to clinical trials. You know, it's like, fuck off, you're going to get 3 graphs at best. And it shits me, in case that is not obviously clear, because universities are so bad at doing commercialization, because they're a research group and they've got hardly any industry stakeholders that actually care and want to work with them, because the university wants to publish stuff and industry doesn't want them to publish. So
and not to mention that, you know, university research groups also have, like, just, you know, dickheads fresh out of college doing things. They aren't exactly experienced, trained professionals yet.
Good ideas industry doesn't give to academia, and there's like a fundamental mistrust between the two of them, and the university doesn't get that. So the university's going for all the commercialization fucking economic accelerator funding means that, like, the actual bodies who are meant to sit in between academia and industry, like fucking the CSIRO, they're meant to be like the commercialization accelerator things, but instead they're doing like random shit, and the government keeps cutting their funding because, like, they're doing random shit instead of commercializing university research and being the translation partner. Instead, it's like every fucking research grant is like, we want you to take it from TRL 3 to TRL 7, you know, in 2 years. All right, this is starting to get too niche and too obscure, I'm sorry. But even if you're applying for an arts grant in Australia now, they're probably asking you like, hey, what is the fucking economic impact of this artwork? It's like, fuck off, just let them make cool art and shit. Like, not everything, like, you're the...
This painting of an inflated Goku really talks about the economy, and it will motivate stock traders to do a better job.
Government, you just... Not everything has to... I'm not saying every grant has to be like for blue sky research, but you have to acknowledge that some blue sky things do have good economic impact. And if you just gauge all ideas by short-term economic impact, then you're never going to develop like low-level technology that we need. Anyway, this whole rant to say the only people that give a rat-dick fuck about R&D in this country is defence. The Australian government has spent, you know, whatever.
It's kind of also similar with America. I mean, thankfully, the one ironic thing I can say is that you can get a lot of fundamental science research rather than, like, you know, scaling up to be applicable to you know, the industry application level. You can get a lot more fundamental science research funded in America. And not just through the Department of Defense. You know, the Department of Energy has interests, NASA has interests. You know, somehow in this fucking country of all countries, it hasn't actually turned into just a, you know, let's shove money into the things that are immediately going to give us short-term returns on investment. They can actually have some fundamental research. I think that's because America, well, until recently, really liked its prestige in doing such a thing. So we kind of get to carry by momentum on that, and as a result, well, that's probably why a country like Australia is just like, fucking America and China are doing all the fundamental research. We need to make ends meet around here. But yeah, the Department of Defense especially loves fundamental research because, you know, they don't want their research obviously to be public, because then all the other countries would know about the cool research and like the application side of things. They're happy to fund something that seems innocuous enough on its surface, and that, you know, might have tangential relationship to them. So that way the, you know, Department of Defense can study stuff on their own in their own secret, you know, labs and, you know, classified labs and shit. So that way they can be like, wow, Lockheed Martin can now build a better missile. Thanks for researching about fucking zirconium and how you can use it to, like, make diamonds or some shit. Anyways, we're gonna use that to make new missiles.
like huge sums of money on submarines. These submarines are not going to be put in service until 2040. They're going to be running until at least 2070. Right? If we did no technological development, these submarines that are designed now in the water in 2070, that's just fucking ridiculous. They're just going to get blown up if we do nothing about it. And none of the economic modeling that anyone does for these large assets like submarines or the goddamn frigates acknowledges that if we don't fucking keep up technological-wise, they're just going to get blown up. That is
right. You're planning to build these massive war machines, but and maybe funding the research that builds them quicker. But you're kind of missing the other aspects of the tech tree that make them worth building and keeping up with everyone else. You're basically just building, wooden ships at this point.
Is bad for the economy. Politicians don't get that. Defense get it. They understand that we need research now that will potentially maybe help a fucking submarine in the 2070s. The government won't fund that blue sky research, but they will dump truckloads of cash into defense. So then defense become that vehicle for funding. You'll find in Australia that heaps and heaps of research is funded by defense, even if the link is reasonably tenuous. It sucks. It's not the good way of doing it, of, running a world. That's how it is. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move to something positive. Let's talk about how much you get paid during a PhD. Why don't we do that? Why don't we talk about how much I got paid?
Or he says how much he got paid. I will say, so I worked in, I think I mentioned this before already. It's probably fairly obvious. My grad school was in Ohio. It's probably not too difficult to guess where. I was paid around, after taxes and trying to think how to word this. After like the taxes and other like kind of, off the top kind of fees that existed for my pay, I was basically paid around $24,000 a year for being a grad student, with an undergraduate degree in chemistry. You could probably tell that sucks. It's basically criminal. It's pretty fucking bad. Now, of course, the benefit of going to chemistry grad school is that there's no scholarship you have to apply for. You don't have like a fucking, tuition to pay. You just kind of get paid to go do the back-breaking labor. Well, maybe not back-breaking, but mind-breaking labor. But even in Ohio, 24K a year is not the best. Can't afford most of the fucking luxury apartments built around the area, so you have to go find some dumpy shit fest that's like a couple blocks away, and you have to commute all the damn time. So that's a bummer. Other universities pay better, and especially the universities that have student unions pay better. But still, you just generally speaking, you will never make enough money in grad school. And if you continue to postdoc afterwards, I don't know, maybe in Australia it's okay. In America, I've heard it's like also just okay. Like you can afford a nice apartment and you still have to do a lot of work, but that's it. Like it's not fun.
Studying a PhD is a paid position, right? The university pays you money to study a PhD. Sure, you're a student, but you're also a staff member. There are examples of people doing scholarship-free or stipend-free PhDs, so they're not getting paid at all. And if you take nothing else away from this video, please take this. Never do an unpaid PhD. It is a paid position.
Scam.
They should be paying you. You might say, oh, well, it's a great opportunity.
No.
They'll waive my tuition if I
internship.
do this scholarship-free PhD. And don't do it, because even if you're financially set up enough to study a PhD for 3 to 7 years without pay, you got to ask yourself, who am I working for that will willingly employ me without paying me? a person that wants you working in that lab without paying you is not someone you want to work for.
No,
And then
they're
if you're
kind
an
of a
international
bad
student,
person.
your visa can be tied to the university. Never do an unpaid PhD. It shouldn't be a thing, right? If you want to work on science or arts for free, you can do that. It's
You can go
called
be a
your free
YouTuber.
time. Like, you don't need to work unpaid at a university. Now that we've made that point clear, the pay is awful.
Yeah.
Once again, it
But some pay is better than none.
varies depending on the country you're in and where you're doing it, and even between universities. But universally, it is less than minimum wage. A PhD, in general, is a minimum of 3 years. You can technically sometimes finish it quicker than 3 years, but that's very, very rare, and often the universities won't let you submit earlier than 3 years. It can drag out a lot longer. Once again, remember, I took about 6 years or so. I know.
And remember that, there in Australia, PhDs are on top of master's research, which in America would just be one big PhD program, roughly 5 years.
People who have entered their 9th year. Don't try not to do that. I know it's very easy to say that, but it's hard to execute it, and I feel for you if you're in that position. In Australia, most of your money, so what's called the stipend, most of your money as a PhD student comes from the government to the university, and the university then gives you that, with the regular payroll, and you get $32,000 a year, which is more than I got. I got $27,000.
Oh, okay. So they're well, all right. Consider the fact that, yes, maybe that stipend on screen right now is about the same amount that I received from grad school, which is a low amount that American students will receive from grad school. But, buying power of the dollar in America is shit versus buying power of the dollar in America and other countries tends to be great, at least for now. Then making, 24K, making 2.4 or 24.6K of US dollars in Australia seems not great, but fine. Making that in America is bad. bad.
$1,000 a year because they raised it a couple of years ago. It's not a livable wage. It's not a livable wage. It is higher elsewhere, but it's important to note that there are a lot of sort of intricacies with it. On the positive side, the Australian PhD stipend, it is not taxed, so it's tax-free. But
Well,
also
that's
it doesn't
nice.
count
That's not
towards, like,
America.
your taxable income at all. So if you have a secondary job or you work a little bit of a job on the side, you can earn still up to the tax-free threshold, which is, I don't know, $18,000 or something a year before you pay tax. I will note also that not many people are doing PhDs these days, so there's a lot more scholarships around. There's heaps of scholarships. I would say at least half of people that I know studying PhDs have an additional scholarship, so you can get another couple of $1,000 on top.
No, that's not true. I guess there was the option to try and do scholarships as well while I was in grad school, but with what fucking free time would I write a scholarship and submit for it? Exactly.
For your stipend, and usually that is also tax-free. So that's what I did as well. I got an extra $8,000 from Defense. They were interested in looking at explosives detection for anti-improvised explosive devices. And so as part of the project, there was budgeted $8,000 a year as an additional top-up scholarship, it was called. Plus I could work up to 8 hours a week. They were reasonably restrictive about it, but I think that's fair enough. The PhD should be your main.
Yeah, that's nice to have universities tell you that actually you shouldn't be teaching. Instead of going to a university being like, please fucking be teaching, please be a TA in your spare time, please, please, please. We don't have enough TAs. And also your PI doesn't want to actually pay you off the grant. They want to spend it on equipment instead of spending it on your wage. Please work a teaching job, please.
Interest. You don't want to try and work 20, 30 hours elsewhere. If you compare that to the American system, it is taxed. However, you often get discounted housing or meals or something like that. They can discount student life that way a little bit. In Australia, you don't get any housing support. So,
yeah,
I'll complain about rent in a second.
I mean, there's graduate student housing,
it's coming. So yeah, if you are looking to do a PhD, those little details make a huge difference to how much disposable income you have to live on, and that really changes your PhD experience. And I'm going to talk about mine now. Okay, I was about to hit the 3-year mark. Everyone's getting extensions. The university were being extremely lenient with extensions, which is very nice of them, and they're offering COVID extensions and stuff like that. But when I emailed the uni and said, I put in this extension form, they eventually got back to me and they said, well, no, actually, none of your money comes through the RTP, the government scholarship. It actually all comes from Defense. Now, I had no idea about this. I hadn't read the fine prints of the documents, I'd never seen that. My professor was surprised to hear this as well. We hadn't realized it was set up this way. So the university said extensions are only for people getting the government money. You have to go to your funding body for extensions. And we were like, well, no, they're not going to extend the grant. Like the funding rounds are different for defense and it's a different financial year and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, well, can I not just get the COVID extension everyone else has? And the university were like, no. What am I going to get paid then? And the university were like,
That's your problem, buddy.
So exactly to the date and the 3-year mark, they cut all payments to me. I worked for like 2-3 months for free, for nothing, going in every day. And that was obviously a bit unsustainable. I ended up picking up this part-time researcher position so I could eat and shit. I was at the university Monday to Friday. I was there every day working either the odd researcher position or on my PhD. And across that financial year, I made $14,000. Like it's less than a third of the minimum wage. That's how much I earned that financial year. I was living out of home with my girlfriend, so my share of the rent in a tiny unit comes out to be $12,000. So after rent, I get less than $40 a week. That was that entire financial year. Like it's my fault for allowing myself to be put in that position, but the university gets away with it because like you're contract based and you're a PhD student, so it's like completely fine. But it's not completely fine. The only reason I was able to survive at all, or like not have to move back home or drop out, the fact that I had YouTube income is the only reason I finished my PhD, because I wasn't making any money. I mean, it took 6 years, so for half of my PhD I was getting paid nothing. A lot of people say, oh, well, he gets away with his YouTube channel because he has a PhD, but no, I have a PhD because I have a YouTube channel. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's the more typical story. Getting a PhD does not allow you to make a YouTube channel. In fact, it's the fucking opposite. It hinders you from doing anything. Like I mentioned, you will be spending all your goddamn waking hours on research and none of your waking hours ever having hobbies or friends or family ever again.
Anyway, you should definitely check what the rules are for extensions. I mean, people are going to call me insane, but it's like, this is just how it works. It's the problem with a PhD and why people are reluctant to do it, I think, a bit more nowadays, is it is a long-term commitment. When you're 3 years into the PhD and you think, like, I only have 1 or 2 years left, it is very difficult to quit. If you're in a job and the job says, oh, we're not going to pay you anymore, you can just quit and get a different job. But the professor I worked under, very, very nice guy, extremely nice guy, and he did set me up with this sort of postdoc role before I'd submitted my PhD thesis, so that I was working basically full-time while writing my PhD thesis, which, again, extended my submission timeline, but allowed me to actually work a job where I got paid. So a postdoc,
Hey, money.
Talking about postdocs, it's kind of alluded to postdoc. Postdoc is what I'm doing now, right? It's a researcher position you do after you finish your doctorate. So you finish a PhD and then you get hired as a researcher. Academia loves to do this insane thing where after you've spent like 5 years specializing in a niche doing your PhD, your postdoc, you're meant to just fly to another country and start working on something completely different.
True. So fucking true. At the very least, you're not just flying to like the other side of the fucking the same country you're living in. But I don't know why. They don't want talent and expertise to stay in the same place. I mentioned this for like my fucking undergrad to graduate student transition. They didn't want you to stay at the same university for grad school. They wanted you to go elsewhere. And then the same thing for a postdoctoral position. Fucking PIs want you endlessly as a grad student forever. If they could keep you there forever working, for low wages and making great research, they would. Until the very moment you actually graduate and become a postdoctorate student. Then they say, fuck this, I'm not hiring you anymore. Get out of here. Go work for somebody else, you smelly nematode. It's so stupid. The academia system is so dumb. It's really dumb.
It's kind of an insane thing to demand because you're often extremely poor at the end of your PhD and you have all this knowledge and set up this network, and then, well, the best academics just uproot their entire life and go to Sweden. I didn't do that. I mean, a lot of Australians...
Maybe there's just some romanticism behind it of like, well, that the English academics of like the 18th century, they went and just took fucking voyages to India, and that took them like 6 months because they had to go by like, shitty boats and horseback for, several weeks at a time on the road, and they had to worry about, land pirates and shit. And it's just like, hey, we have fucking planes and cars now. trains. We don't have to do the things this way anymore. It's not like some grand pilgrimage to show how cool I am and masculine and I'm as a scientist. I'm a fucking scientist. I wear a lab coat and I don't go to the gym. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna be the pinnacle of the Renaissance man. I'm gonna go and fucking, like, look at how, arsenic can be used to make light do funny things instead of poison people. Like, what are we doing here?
Aren't doing that, especially kind of post-COVID. All the good academics probably went overseas. That's not me. I stayed at the same university. I've changed groups and done a few different things, and that's been really great, and it's fantastic. I really enjoyed the postdoc role. And you're ready for the punchline? Is the money worth it? No. Just straight up. Like, I can't even set that up. So a postdoc in Australia, you get paid pretty much bang on $100,000, which sounds like a lot. 100,000 Australian dollars.
Terrible?
Sure.
It's fine, but like with a PhD, you can absolutely make more money than that. I mean, shit. Looking at that USD comparison, I make nearly 100K USD on a master's degree, so that should tell you something. And I'm not even working for an evil fucking corporate industry. I'm working for a university's health and safety department. I do lab inspections. Like, yeah, this is criminally underpaid for a PhD. It still is terrible. I guess maybe this is why, a professor doesn't want to keep their grad student as a postdoc, because then it means that they have to pay them.
I'm only working 0.8 because on Fridays I like to film YouTube videos, and 60% of my income goes to rent from the postdoc role. 60% of that goes to rent, and that's something, if you're coming to work in Australia, you have to budget half of your money for rent. Like, you just have to do that.
Like America.
The best way, of course, is to just buy a house. It's cheaper to buy a house.
Oh, just buy a house,
tip,
bro.
if you're thinking about coming to work in Australia, is have $200,000 before you arrive. Done the PhD and then a postdoc and then become a professor, and
money?
you might think, oh, well, I could do that. And it's like, no, it's like playing tennis and then thinking I'm going to play Wimbledon and win $1 million. Like, no one becomes a professor anymore. Like, it's not a thing. At the university, I have seen...
Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to start becoming professors. I mean, they're all, turning like fucking 80 and dying now, so someone's got to replace them.
One person at the university be promoted internally from a researcher to assistant professor in 8 years. And if you're in Australia and you're doing a PhD in Australia, it's just not a career that's open to you anymore. Even if a new position opens up, the university in Australia will get someone from overseas to fill that position because they want international talent. Academia...
Hey, welcome, Ace. Acetone has ace in it, therefore you're immune. Oh, true. Tell me how many liters of acetone you can chug, and I will be very impressed with it. You might even get an award. It might be a reward related to time of death, but hopefully not.
As a career, it's not a viable option. Forget about that. You shouldn't be doing a PhD to pursue academia. And if anyone tells you that's an option, it might have been an option when they did it, when, the professors did it in the 80s or 90s or whatever. It's just not an option anymore. So financially, I wish I had something better to say, but financially, I will probably never recover from having done a PhD.
Financially,
I've had friends out of high school
who,
instead of going to university, have worked a job. Crazy, right? I know. Instead of doing what I did, which was go $35,000 in debt.
I just want to do fake bullshit and look at chemicals and grow crystals all day. Going to guess that you could do 7 liters of acetone? All right, I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, if you could go for the 8, then you can down 2 standard size bottles, and then we'd really be in business. You don't need to leave. It's like leaving, just a little drop in the milk jug, assuming like your partner's gonna get to it later. Like, you should really just finish off the jug.
Even if I earn $200,000 a year from now, it's going to take me years to catch up to where someone would be if they were earning $80,000 consistently.
Yeah,
and that's ignoring things like...
Trying to just become a professor is not going to actually make you up the money that you would have lost by, just working a job.
Entering the housing market in 2019, like an inanimate house earned more money in inflation than I did during my PhD each year. All right, that's the financial
that sucks to hear.
I should say thank you to all the Patreons
valuable.
and people who have clicked on the ads over the years. I wasn't too concerned about failing financially as much as I potentially should have been. There's a lot of people who move to a foreign country, don't speak the language very well, get priced out of the housing market and are stuck in their PhD, and those people I have a lot of sympathy for because, your paper gets rejected, you can barely afford the beer to commiserate, Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have to worry. Well, I don't know. I had to worry about like my financials pretty closely in grad school, but like I am I'm pretty good at budgeting, all things considered. Like even when I was making a shitty like 24K a year, post off the top expenses and everything in grad school, like I still managed to find a place that was like reasonable in rent and reasonable. Still maybe about 50% of my fucking monthly income. Um, and I, was able to buy, the right foods at a, local grocery store. And thankfully, I'm a cheap date. Put it this way, like I didn't feel like drinking alcohol back then, so I didn't have money to spend on that. I didn't have money I wanted to spend on like collectibles and hobbies outside of the occasional like video game. And even when I bought a video game, it's like, okay, here's a replayable thing. I'm not gonna need to spend, money on fucking battle passes every year or something stupid like that. Um, I didn't collect those things, didn't, smoke weed or something like that. Like I just kind of still had a couple hundred left over every month. And oh, also I don't have the big one of having undergrad fucking debt bills to pay off. I don't have tuition to pay off retroactively. So like that makes living a little bit easier. Why'd I call them debt bills? They're called loans. Anyways, yeah, financially, grad school really is only tenable if you're like have minimal or no undergrad debt. You have to. I mean, thankfully, grad school will accept older candidates still, but like you really should get all of your debt affairs in order before going to grad school. It's just because I mean, you're gonna be poor and miserable in grad school even if you have all your debt paid off. So like you 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 might as well not be in the fucking negatives too. Um, of course, by the time you've paid off your undergrad debt, then you're actually working a real job that pays you some real money. Not as much as a master's or a PhD degree job would, but it's still some real money, and that's pretty hard to walk back into fucking academia for. To be like, yeah, I'm gonna abandon my 70K a year job so I can go work for fucking peanuts. Getting a PhD or a master's degree. Anyways, yeah, should you do a PhD? I'll hear Tom out on this one before I give my overall thoughts. It's largely a summary of what I said at the beginning of the video, but might as well say them again with anything else I have in mind.
Finally get to the question, should you do a PhD? People will tell you that this is a difficult question that's hard to answer. That's not true. The answer is no. No, you should not do a PhD. It's financially crippling, such a long-term commitment. It does not prepare you for a job. I mean, it does not train you well. In fact, I would say that it actively works against your employment. Really, it doesn't make you ready to go into a job, and a lot of employers know this, so it had years of can actually work against you, make you less employable than if you didn't have the PhD. And then even if you're applying for jobs where they're kind of asking for people with PhD level experience, you're competing against other people who have actual work experience. So it doesn't make the job market better having a PhD. So no, you shouldn't do a PhD.
However,
I'll let you in on a secret here. I'll let you
yeah,
in on
however,
come here. Right. You can actually just do whatever you want. Like, life is not about what you should and shouldn't do. You can just do it. Of course, it's not what I should have done, but I don't regret doing it. I mean, it's hard at times, but it's fantastic. I'd do it again. I mean, I wouldn't do a second PhD. One is fucking enough. I think
but it's like going on like a crazy drug-induced bender once in a while. Maybe having to like run from the cops on something, like because you're a little drunk one time, and yeah, you don't want to do it again. But like, oh, that's a valuable life experience. It's a fun story to tell people.
good sign that you'll want to do a PhD is well placed is that when you think about it, you think that you would be happy no matter the outcome of the PhD. Obviously, you're going to pass. You're not using it to definitely get a job in academia. Then if you didn't get a job in academia, you'd be disappointed. If you think there's no way you could really be disappointed, there for the ride, then I don't think there's any way you can look back on the PhD in regret and see them as wasted years. Sure, I should have been earning more money and I should have done this and that, but I don't regret it. You can just do it it anyway. If you are in the middle of a PhD or, thinking of starting it or you've finished it, you should definitely give your opinions in the comments, because I'm obviously just giving my opinions, but if you've got any particular tips, especially about staying motivated, what to look for in a PhD, or whether you think other people should do it or not, or what it is like in your country, that's it. Sometimes you don't need advice, I don't think people tell you that. Sometimes you don't need advice.
Sometimes you just go with your gut, even if your gut's wrong.
Where am I?
Awesome. Shoot, Nile Red, this isn't your time yet. You'll get a video next month. Yeah, I guess my answer then to the question of should you do a PhD. Yeah, let me bring up a really good, a nice frame to pause on while I talk about this. There we go. That's a great frame. And I'll put some music on in the background here. So yeah, I mean, he brings up great points of like, yeah, no, like, getting a PhD in and of itself is not really going to make your prospects for some specific kind of job better. If anything, it makes it so that way you have yes, you are competing in a narrower pool, but that pool also tends to have people who are highly experienced, and it's just one of those things where, like, well, they want to hire the old PhDs, not the new PhDs, which is fucked up and causes the, whole job economy market to be topsy-turvy, but that's a larger societal problem, not just PhDs. But it is still like, wow, I get to do a thing for my hyper interest, and it's going to actually, feed into that, and someone's paying me for it. That's great. It's a legitimate thing to want to go do it. I mean, I would still say my overall opinion on should you do a PhD is yes, with a couple extra the biggest asterisk being finances. Absolutely fucking do not do a PhD if you don't have the finances to suffer the low pay environment of grad school, which is usually going to be riding on the back of crippling student debt from undergraduate. That is a case where you don't do a PhD, you just get your damn money because you need to have something to make your life a little bit better. But say you're in a position where at the very least, you have little to no debt from undergrad, like I did, then yeah, fucking, I still say go for it if you are actually interested in the subject you're interested in. If you're just interested for the job, then no, don't bother. Just get a job and, you'll be fine. But if you actually really love, the subject, like how I really love chemistry just as a personal passion of mine, I treat it like how some people probably treat like their art babies of like, this is my personal passion, making interpretive rap or something like that. Like mine is doing chemistry research. Like there's still an itch in me to want to go back to do R&D, in my future. But like in that case, do it. Even though it's still going to be like, it's going to be miserable. It's going to hurt. You're going to not be paid very much. You're going to have to work miserably long hours. It's going to be horribly long nights. You're not going to have people to talk to. The whole academia system is going to frustrate you at every turn, from making you do teaching at the same time as research to also making you then do a high-pressure candidacy pitch so that way you actually get accepted into your PhD program. And then over the next couple of years, you have to engage with the publish or perish mentality and how expensive journals are to get published in, how much of a pain in the ass it is to get published in a journal, even though you're fucking paying them to get your work published there, so that way other people have to pay the journal to access the goddamn paper. You're gonna get hit with those roadblocks. You're then gonna get hit with like your PI might have a fucking crazy mood swings or be like actually immature, and just be presenting as if they're a real adult. Or maybe they'll get hurt, or they'll go on maternity leave, or they'll like fucking, worst case scenario, they're old and they die. Like, then that's going to throw your PhD research into turmoil. You could also you're also missing out on like your life events. I mean, shit, we're talking about PhDs likely happening in your 20s. This is when you're probably like trying to meet other people for friendship or romance. Like, you're going to be pretty hard pressed, you know, in that aspect, unless you end up finding, you know, your soulmate, fucking doing research, which is not the most unlikely thing, but, you know, will you do have time to actually elope? Hell no. But I say still go for it. And this is someone who did not finish his PhD. Go for it, especially even if you don't plan on finishing it and just want to get your master's degree, because the whole process of doing your PhD and failing to get your PhD will actually tell you an immense amount of information about yourself. I did not get my PhD, even though it was literally my one and only life stream. It is maybe, in some minds, a little bit sad to hear that ever since I was an elementary schooler, my fucking dream was to become a PhD chemist, or, you know, the highest echelon of chemist I could imagine at the time, and eventually that was like, oh wow, PhD chemist, yippee. And, you know, never had like I want to be a firefighter, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a rock star. That never happened to me. I was like, nope, PhD chemist ever since elementary school. And I didn't achieve that dream. I went for it, and then reality was like, this shit too hard. I cannot do this. My mental health is collapsing. But that whole experience taught me a ridiculous amount about myself. What I can tolerate as far as stress is concerned, and time management, how well I can manage my time, how well I can manage my own personal adult life in tandem with a ridiculous job, how well I can manage my budget while having not too much to work with, how well I can manage social isolation and how to stay sane despite it. Just general organizational skills, how to just keep on task even while you have no motivation to do anything anymore. How to just actually appreciate the things that you want to, like, appreciate the things that are good in a shitty situation. And also, like, if you end up succeeding at a PhD and you don't end up learning your limits, basically, like I did, then congratulations, you have a PhD by the end of it. You didn't need to learn all these lessons because you're clearly built fucking different. If you manage to get through the PhD system in America, you're clearly just built different, and your limits are limitless. But if you make an earnest effort at making that PhD and drop out with a master's, you'll still find out your limits, and you'll find out where your limits are, and you'll find out that they're pretty high. They have pretty high limits. So I would still say it's worth it, provided all your financials are in order, which is kind of a tall ask. But that was my experience with academia. It's somewhat similar, but still pretty different from his. I don't know. It's a weird kind of. It's both a sore spot and a spot. Am I turning Canadian? It's both a sore spot and a soft spot at the same time. For me, my time in grad school and academia, I don't miss it. I don't miss the exact system at all, but I really miss the concept and the excitement of working directly on my fixation in life, my passion in life, very dearly. It's a weird kind of set of mixed feelings. That felt good to get all that out of my system over an extended 2-hour period. Maybe one day I'll make a video summarizing it and condensing it more for someone who doesn't want to watch a random React stream for 2 hours. But yeah, that was a very satisfying video to watch personally. I like doing all my chemistry reacts because look at the colors and the crystals and the fire, and I mean genuinely that's awesome. That's why I got into chemistry. But this was satisfying on a different personal kind of level of like, yeah, that's academia, and I'm so fucking glad to be done with it. But I do kind of miss a couple of bits of it too, you know? It's like how it's like how maybe you break up with an ex and it's like, I really don't miss them. It was a terrible relationship we had, but also, their hair really was nice. And they did make they did always make Christmas a really good day. That kind of bullshit. So, you I think that's gonna do it for me tonight. Just the one video, just the one very long video to react to. I'm going to hop in our Discord after this and post the schedule for the next couple of days because we do have a stream coming up on Saturday. We're going to be drawing Mega Man characters, me, Pig Serpent, and Rowan. Only I know anything about Mega Man, and only Rowan knows how to draw. So that's going to be an interesting experience. But we're going to be drawing y'all's prompts that we got that submitted a couple weeks ago. And it's going to be an earlier time than usual. It's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern, so be sure to show up on time for that rather than way too late. And definitely enjoy that. As mentioned, there is a Discord. You can join it if you haven't yet, because we talk about Mega Man and other games and maybe a little bit of science every once in a while down there. I have socials, Blue Sky and Twitter, if you want to follow me there, even though I don't really do much on them, but, they exist. And be sure to interact with the video because we are all beholden to the algorithm and its us. But, doing all that helps the video spread and it, makes me feel happy. And isn't me feeling happy the whole reason that I do this hobby? Exactly. It is. Anything else I need to say? No, I think we're good on that. So yeah, just be sure to, if there's ever a stream to tune in for and make time for, come to the Saturday stream. It's going to be great. I guarantee it. So with that, I'm going to call it for the night. Thanks for lurking, everybody, and coming around. And enjoy yourselves. Happy Memorial Day weekend as it comes up. Maybe get an extended weekend for it. I know I sure do. All right. Goodbye.